June 25th, 2009. Los Angeles. A city used to headlines but never ready for this one. Shortly after noon, the world's greatest performer, the man who redefined rhythm, dance, and fame itself, was gone. Michael Jackson was dead. He was 50 years old. The news moved faster than light. Within minutes, television screens around the globe went black and white. The king of pop dies. Crowds gathered outside UCLA Medical Center. People fell to their knees, some crying, some silent. Across continents, strangers held candles, played his songs, and whispered the same words through tears. No, not him. Michael had lived a life that seemed larger than the world itself. He had moonwalked across boundaries of race, age, and culture, uniting billions in music that felt eternal. He wasn't just an artist, he was a phenomenon, a pulse that beat in sync with humanity. But behind the glittering glove, the iconic moves, the voice that could break hearts, there was a fragile soul. He had spent his whole life trying to heal others through music, yet no one had truly healed him. And when his heart stopped beating, it wasn't just a man who died. It was an entire chapter of human history. In Gary, Indiana, his hometown, the old Jackson house stood silent. In London, fans lit candles where he was supposed to begin his final tour. This is it. In Neverland, the gates stayed closed, guarded by memory and ghosts. The boy who sang "I'll Be There" had kept his promise. Even in death, he was still there, everywhere. But as the world mourned, one question lingered quietly beneath the music. How can someone who gave so much light die in such darkness? Long before the world called him the king of pop, he was just Michael Joseph Jackson, a small boy with big eyes and a voice that could stop time. He was born on August 29, 1958, in Gary, Indiana, in a tiny house crowded with love, noise, and dreams. The Jacksons were poor, a working-class family living on the edge of exhaustion. His father, Joe, worked long hours at a steel mill. His mother, Catherine, raised 9 children and filled the home with gospel songs and prayer. Music was the family's heartbeat. In the evenings, Joe would gather his sons in the living room, an old guitar in his hand, and demand perfection. It wasn't a choice. It was survival. The world outside was cold and hard, but inside that cramped house, rhythm became a kind of hope. Michael was different. Even at 5 years old, he had a presence, that rare spark that makes the air feel alive. When he sang, his brothers would stop and stare. When he danced, he didn't mimic. He transformed. Joe saw it first, and from that moment on, Michael's childhood ended. The Jackson 5 was born. 5 brothers chasing the American dream, performing in bars, talent shows, and small theaters. Michael, barely old enough for school, became the group's lead. He wore tight suits, smiled through exhaustion, and sang with the soul of a man twice his age. By the time he was 10, he wasn't just a child star. He was the center of the universe for millions of fans. But fame, even early, came with a shadow. Joe Jackson's discipline was brutal. Mistakes were met with shouting, sometimes worse. Michael loved his father, but he feared him even more. He would later say, "He'd just look at me and I'd start to cry." The stage became both sanctuary and prison. In front of a crowd, Michael could be anyone. Free, confident, adored. But off stage, he was just a little boy who wanted to play, who wanted someone to tell him that it was okay to rest. By 1969, "I Want You Back" hit #1 on the Billboard charts, and the Jackson 5 became an unstoppable force. Motown had found its new miracle. But amid the lights, Michael's innocence began to slip away. He wasn't just singing songs anymore. He was carrying an entire family, an entire dream, on his shoulders. Every cheer from the crowd lifted him higher, but every spotlight pushed him further from the child he used to be. He had entered the world stage, and the world would never let him leave it again. By the time most kids were figuring out who they were, Michael Jackson already belonged to the world. The Jackson 5 toured relentlessly. Stadiums, television appearances, interviews, rehearsals. Michael smiled through it all, but behind the bright eyes was a boy aging too fast. The crowds adored him, but no one really knew him. When the group's fame began to fade in the mid-1970s, Michael was just a teenager, but he already understood what it meant to carry the weight of an empire. He loved his brothers, but he was different. Hungrier, more restless, more driven. He wanted art, freedom, innovation. He wanted to move people, not just entertain them. At 19, he began to break away. He worked with producer Quincy Jones on Off the Wall, 1979, and what came out was not a boy anymore. It was a phenomenon. The album fused disco, soul, and pop into something entirely new. Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, Rock With You. They weren't just hits. They were declarations of identity. He was no longer the kid from the Jackson 5. He was Michael Jackson, and he had found his sound. But Thriller changed everything. Released in 1982, it became the best-selling album in history. More than 70 million copies sold worldwide. Every track was iconic. Beat It, Billie Jean, Human Nature, and, of course, Thriller itself, with its revolutionary music video that turned television into a global stage. He didn't just perform music, he invented a new language for it. The world had never seen anything like him. He moonwalked across the stage, defied gravity, and made audiences believe in magic again. Black and white, young and old, every culture knew his name. When he performed at the Motown 25th anniversary special in 1983, and the first moonwalk hit the screen, the moment froze in time. People screamed, cried, fainted. For 3 seconds, humanity forgot its differences and moved to the same beat. But the greater the light, the darker the shadow. Michael became trapped inside his own legend. Everywhere he went, crowds formed. Cameras followed his every move. He couldn't walk the streets, couldn't buy groceries, couldn't breathe without becoming a headline. He bought Neverland Ranch, his private sanctuary, a place where he could finally be a child again. He filled it with animals, music, rides, laughter. But even there, peace was fragile. He worked endlessly. Albums like Bad, Dangerous, and History pushed boundaries further, mixing pop, R&B, rock, and messages of pain and redemption. His perfectionism was legendary. He rehearsed until exhaustion, demanded excellence from everyone, and gave every ounce of his soul to every note. When he sang Man in the Mirror, it wasn't a pop song. It was a confession. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change. He donated millions to children's hospitals, to Africa, to disaster relief funds. His faith in humanity was unshakable. He believed music could heal the world, and for a while it did. By the early 90s, Michael was not just a star, he was an idea, a universal symbol of creativity, compassion, and mystery. But fame, once again, began to consume him. The same media that had built him now began to dismantle him piece by piece. They whispered, exaggerated, invented. They forgot that beneath the glove and the sparkle, there was still a man, fragile, human, searching. Still, Michael never stopped performing. No matter how many storms surrounded him, the stage remained his truth. Under the lights, he was untouchable. Pure energy, pure love. And yet, when the curtains closed, the silence always came back. And in that silence, the boy from Gary, Indiana, still whispered to himself the same question he had carried since childhood. If the whole world loves me, why do I still feel alone? Fame had made Michael Jackson untouchable, but it also made him unbearably isolated. By the mid-1990s, his name was no longer just music. It was a battleground. Every breath he took, every move he made, every word he spoke became public property. And when the world owns you, there's very little left for yourself. The boy who had once sung, "I Want You Back Now," wanted only one thing: peace. But peace doesn't sell newspapers, and peace doesn't fill tabloids. The accusations came first like whispers, then like thunder. Suddenly, the same world that had adored him turned its eyes with suspicion. He denied it all, fiercely, painfully, publicly. But denial never mattered as much as headlines. And no matter how many courts cleared his name, something inside him broke forever. He began to disappear behind walls and masks, retreating into Neverland, like a wounded child running from the noise. The ranch that had once been filled with laughter grew quiet. The rides rusted, the gates closed, and the man who had given joy to billions began to fade into rumor and myth. His appearance changed. His health wavered. He became the target of ridicule. a caricature drawn by those who never tried to understand him. But those who knew him, his family, his close friends, saw a man still clinging to the same fragile hope, that music could heal him the way it once had. He poured that pain into his art. Earth Song, They Don't Care About Us, Stranger in Moscow. Each one a cry from a man who no longer trusted the world that made him. He sang about loneliness, injustice, the earth dying, and the child inside him who still believed in miracles. On stage, he still glowed, sweat dripping, voice trembling, heart wide open. But backstage, he was exhausted, sleepless, haunted. His marriage to Lisa Marie Presley, a strange union between two royal dynasties of music, collapsed under the weight of the circus around them. Later, his second marriage brought him children, and for the first time, there was a glimpse of peace in his eyes. He adored them, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, and swore they would have the childhood he never could. In their laughter, he found his only sanctuary, but the years took their toll. Prescription medications became a way to rest, to numb the pain, to slow down a body and mind that refused to stop. He lived surrounded by security but not safety, by money but not comfort. His voice is still angelic, began to sound like an echo of the boy he once was. And yet, in 2009, there was hope again. He announced a new tour, This Is It, 50 shows in London, a final chance to reclaim his throne and his joy. In rehearsals, he danced like a man half his age. The spark was back. The voice, though thinner, still carried that same impossible emotion. The world prepared for his return. He said softly to his crew, "This is the final curtain call." No one understood then how literal those words would become. The rehearsals ended late at night. He would go home exhausted, take medication to sleep, then wake to do it all again. Those close to him saw the warning signs, the fragility, the fatigue, the whispers of pain behind his smile. And then one June afternoon, his heart finally gave out. The man who had danced on air, who had made the world believe in magic, stopped breathing. The silence that followed was unbearable, because for the first time in 50 years, there was no more Michael Jackson. Only echoes of a voice that changed everything and a heart that gave too much. When the news of Michael Jackson's death broke, the world didn't just react, it collapsed. Television anchors cried live on air. Fans flooded the streets of Los Angeles, London, Tokyo, Lagos. Radio stations across continents stopped their playlists and played Man in the Mirror on repeat. The grief wasn't about losing a celebrity, it was about losing a piece of history, a voice that had soundtracked the childhood of the planet. Within hours, vigils formed outside hospitals, homes, and city squares. Candles flickered, speakers blared Billie Jean, and millions of people sang through their tears. For a generation, it felt like time itself had stopped, as if the heartbeat of the world had skipped a note. At the Jackson family home in Encino, California, his brothers and sisters wept in silence. His mother, Catherine, was inconsolable. His father, Joe, sat apart. The man who had once pushed a boy to greatness, now staring at the cost of that dream. And his three children, too young to understand the weight of the loss, clung to one another, unaware that they were now heirs to both an empire and an emptiness. Michael's estate was enormous, worth hundreds of millions of dollars in royalties, music rights, and assets. Yet what moved the world wasn't the wealth he left behind, but the legacy of emotion. He had turned pain into melody, isolation into rhythm, fear into beauty. From Thriller to Heal the World, every song carried the same message. Love is stronger than anything that divides us. His memorial service, broadcast globally, became one of the most watched events in television history. Inside the Staples Center, stars and friends paid tribute. Stevie Wonder, Brooke Shields, Smokey Robinson. And when his daughter, Paris Jackson, took the microphone, her trembling voice broke the world's heart. "Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine. I just want to say I love him so much." In that moment, the myth vanished. There was no more king of pop, only a father, a son, a fragile human being who had given everything he had. In the years since, his influence hasn't faded. You can hear him in every pop record, every dance routine, every artist who grew up watching him transform sound into light. He changed what music videos could be. He changed what stage performance meant. He changed what fame could do, both its miracles and its dangers. But perhaps the most profound part of his legacy isn't musical, it's emotional. Michael Jackson made people believe in wonder again. He showed that art could cross color, language, and generation. He made strangers dance together, cry together, dream together. He was flawed, yes, haunted even. But he also embodied the childlike faith that beauty could still heal the world. And that belief, that impossible, pure belief, continues to live in millions of hearts. Neverland now stands as a ghost of that dream. The ride's empty, the gates locked. But sometimes in the California dusk, fans still gather outside, leaving flowers and notes that say things like, "Thank you for teaching us love." It's quiet, peaceful, almost sacred. Michael's story was never just about music. It was about transformation, a boy who turned loneliness into light. And though his life ended in pain, his message endures. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change. The world still sings it, still believes it. And in every moonwalk, in every child who dares to dream beyond what seems possible, his heart still beats. The day of his funeral, Los Angeles was wrapped in silence. Over 20,000 people filled the Staples Center, the same arena where he had rehearsed just days before. Outside, tens of thousands more gathered, holding sunflowers, posters, and tears. Inside, beneath the soft blue light of the stage, his golden casket rested surrounded by lilies. There were no dancers, no fireworks, no spectacle, only music and grief. Stevie Wonder sang, "I never dreamed you'd leave in summer." Mariah Carey's voice cracked as she whispered, "We'll never forget." And then, in the kind of silence that belongs only to moments like this, a little girl stepped forward. Paris Jackson, trembling, took the microphone and spoke through tears. "Ever since I was born, Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine. And I just want to say I love him so much." Her words were simple, but they shattered the world's heart. For the first time, Michael Jackson wasn't a superstar, or a headline, or a legend. He was just a father. Loved, missed, gone. When the service ended, the world didn't move right away. People stood still, crying quietly as Man in the Mirror began to play. On the screen above the stage, images of Michael through the years. The boy, the dreamer, the icon, faded one into another. And as his final message filled the arena, "Make that change," it was as if the world itself was promising to carry his torch. At Forest Lawn Memorial Park, his casket was laid to rest among flowers and stars. But you can't bury what has become part of the world's heartbeat. Today, more than a decade later, children who never saw him live still move like him, still feel him. Because Michael Jackson didn't just make music, he made emotion visible. He proved that you can be both broken and brilliant, both misunderstood and magnificent, both human and eternal. And so the question remains, soft as a fading melody. What does it mean to leave the world too soon when your voice never truly leaves it? And maybe, just maybe, that was his greatest miracle. He stopped breathing, but he never stopped singing.